what, in your opinion, you mentioned a few things, is really the root cause to heart disease and, died suddenly, all these types of cardiovascular issues that we're seeing now at an even more rapid rate? To me, it seems like improper redox and mitochondrial dysfunction, but I'm curious on your take.
So if it's also important to be specific about what heart disease you're talking about, right? There's so-called congestive heart failure and arrhythmias, but mostly people are talking about heart attacks. That's the main thing. So the question is, what causes heart attacks? And again, the way to think, if you want to think logically, rationally, or scientifically, is to find the claim. The claim is, and you can ask every cardiologist, every internist, every family doctor, every man on the street or woman, what causes heart attacks? They say the same thing. You have 3 major coronary arteries. All the blood goes to your heart, goes through those arteries, and they get blocked with plaque, and the blood can't get through, and then the part downstream dies because of lack of oxygen and blood flow. So, by the way, there's no oxygen in the blood. That's a whole nother story, but we don't have to get into that. But that's part of the story. So then there's, of course, arguments about what causes the plaque. Some people say LDL, some people say low HDL, some people say infections, inflammation, heavy metals, etc. But there's no argument that it's the plaque that blocks the blood flow that causes heart attacks, right? Except me, of course. Now, let's think about that. Again, I can ask you some questions. Do you think all the arteries, including the coronary arteries, are essentially made of the same stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. There's no theory that the coronary artery is made of this and the hepatic artery is made of something totally different. Same arteries, hepatic, spleen, etc. Another question. Is the blood that goes through the coronary arteries composed of the same stuff as the blood that goes through all the rest of the arteries?
Yeah.
Obviously. Okay. So if there's something that's too much in the blood in an artery that's the same, like cholesterol or HDL or boogers or something, it would precipitate in the coronary arteries, and it would also precipitate in the splenic artery.
Yeah, right? It should. Yep.
The problem is it's something in the blood that's not right. So it's, since the same blood, same arteries, got to be the same everywhere in the body. And in fact, you do get plaque buildup in the splenic artery, hepatic artery, coronary artery, carotid artery, femoral artery, and all the other ones, right? Same plaque, same stuff, same artery. How many people do you know or heard of in your life who had spleen attacks?
Not many. None.
I've asked probably 100,000 people. Nobody, and I was an ER doctor for years. Nobody, never saw it. How about liver attacks?
No.
Kidney attacks?
Kidney failure, that's about it, but that's different.
Failure, different.
Yeah.
No, doesn't happen. How about, anybody who's had a heart attack or ever heard of anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Quite a few.
Thousands. Dick Cheney, Bill Clinton, a few other people. Why is that? Same artery, same plaque, same blood.
Must be something unique to that specific area then.
So the heart has got to be different than the spleen, not the artery, because the artery is the same. Now, here's another question. And I saw this because I wrote a book about the heart, and so I had lots of heart patients. People came to me, same story over and over. I was walking up a hill with my wife, and I felt a little chest pain, and I told my wife I probably shouldn't have done that. She told me I had to go to the cardiologist. He did some tests. He says I have a 95% blockage of my right or left or anterior descending coronary artery, and then they usually wag their finger and say, if it blocks anymore, you're going to have a heart attack. Right? They come to me then. Now, if they tell you that all the blood through your heart to your heart goes through those 3 coronary arteries. So he just told the guy he has 5% blood flow to one of the major areas of his heart. Right? Got a 95% blockage. That means 5% of the blood is. How did he walk up that hill?
Yeah, that seems like, pretty significant. Like, even at what, 30% blockage? Yeah, it would be like a massive difference.
Not a big deal. Yeah. You got 20% blood flow. Now, if you're 93% blocked and you block another 3%, like now you're 96, you think that's going to make any difference?
No, splitting hairs at that point. So is it then the action we're talking, the electrostatic action, like in the capillaries, that's really navigating around this blockage?
Well, we don't know that yet. All we know is that story is hooey.
Yeah.
So then when I heard that, and I mean, I just thought of those things. I just, I said, okay, I'm going to go look in every autopsy study that's ever been done. How many people who die of a heart attack, right? That's the worst of the worst. Joe Blow comes in, has a heart attack, dead. That's got to be the worst, doesn't live in it. So I looked at all the studies, the percentage of people who had any blockage at all to that artery leading to that part of the heart, it varied from a low of 18% to a high of 78%. And the best study ever done, a guy named Giorgio Beroldi, who wrote a book on this, 41% of the people who die of a heart attack by autopsy have a blockage of any significance. And half of the blockages come after the heart attack, not before, which means 20% of the people who die of a heart attack have significant plaque in the artery leading to that part of the heart, which of course means 80% don't. Now, just even the 20% doesn't mean that's what caused the heart attack. It just means they had plaque. Doesn't prove it's the cause. And so we have 80% unaccounted for, which is, by the way, why stents and bypasses have never been shown to prolong life, prevent heart attacks, or even successfully treat chest pain. So that's a fact. But so we now know that heart attacks are not caused by plaque buildup in your coronary artery. And we don't have to go back to that because it's already a fact. So then the next question, since we already know that, so what does cause heart attacks? Right? So that's the next question. So we know that it's got to be something different about the heart and versus the spleen and the liver and the foot, because you don't have foot attacks. So the difference is we have essentially 2 kinds of metabolism. We have, so-called oxidative phosphorylation, which doesn't use oxygen because there's no oxygen in the blood. But again, that's a whole long story. And we have glycolysis or fermentation. Glycolysis builds up lactic acid, and oxidative phosphorylation is supposedly in the Krebs, in the mitochondria, right? So if you have problems with your mitochondria, which, by the way, the heart and the brain, which is the only other area that has attacks called strokes, they have the most mitochondria. They generate the most energy. And if you have a problem with them because of a whole lot of reasons, like bad food and heavy metals and EMFs and it's emotional stuff and whatever, you do what's called a glycolytic shift, which you start fermenting fuel. And that builds up lactic acid, which causes cramps and pain, same as in your leg. And then you stop moving because you have a leg cramp. The difference with the heart and the brain is they can't stop. So the fermentation continues, the lactic acid builds up, you get a localized acidification of the tissue, which then causes necrosis, which is what we mean by a heart attack. So you can see the whole chain of events. And then once the tissue dies, like a river that's flowing, and then beaver builds a dam, and then you get debris upstream from the dam, right? That's what happens to the heart. You get a damage to the tissue. The blood flow coming into that builds up debris, and that's why you get plaque buildup after the heart attack, not before. And they falsely attribute the effect of the poor. So this is a metabolic problem. It's a damaged energy generation, and the energy field of the heart contracts in, and you get damage to the tissue, and the acid damages the tissue, and then the blood can't go through, and then it builds up plaque, and then you falsely ascribe the problem to the buildup of the plaque. And that describes exactly what you see in literally every case.
So this is really, you're talking about, yeah, the Warburg metabolism, right? Shifting to more glycolysis. And we get, you know, obviously there's a lot of similarities there with cancer, but how much is this happening on a daily basis where our body's able to handle that to a certain degree? Like, we're all exposed to some sort of toxins. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. You know, when does it become, like, is this built up over time? The tissue damage, just the necrosis accumulates, and our body's not properly cleaning it up via, you know, apoptosis, autophagy, or something else, lymphatic drainage, due to poor sleep and light. Or is this, you know, some people have a heart attack very suddenly, not in their late years. So I'm curious, kind of the build up to that as well.
I mean, it could be any number of possible avenues to get there. It could be a sudden insult, right? So you could have an acute damage from some sort of poisoning, like taking an injection of some, you know, metabolic poison, which you were told would give you immunity, even though we don't even have an immune system. But that's a whole nother story. Um, but so you could be poisoned. You could be poisoned with electromagnetic fields, and then you can't metabolize, and then you build up lactic acid. Or it could happen slowly, and then you just get to a threshold where you can't, you know, you can't keep up with your energy demands. So it could happen in a lot of ways.